They dragged the black stallion across the dirt like it was already dead. Its legs trembled, its ribs showed through its skin, and every rancher standing there believed the animal had finally gone mad. "Put it down before it kills somebody," one man shouted. The sheriff lifted his rifle. And that's when a dusty stranger stepped out of the crowd. "Wait," he said quietly. "Before you shoot him, let me see his eyes." The ranch owner laughed. "You think his eyes matter? That beast nearly tore a stable apart last night." But the stranger didn't answer. He walked closer, slowly, carefully, until he was standing inches away from the furious stallion everyone feared. The horse suddenly stopped fighting. No kicking, no screaming, just silence. Then the stranger looked into its eyes, and his face turned pale. Because what he saw there wasn't rage. It was terror, and in that exact moment, he realized the stallion wasn't trying to hurt anyone. It was trying to warn them about something hiding on that ranch. Here's a strong voiceover outro, script exactly in your style, with clear order and engagement hooks. Before you go, make sure you subscribe first for more shocking stories like this. Now tell us in the comments, what do you think was really hiding on that ranch? We read every comment, so don't hold back. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the like button and share it with your friends who love mystery and thriller stories. And make sure you press the bell icon so you never miss our next upload. For the next video, what topic should I create next? Tell us in the comments. Your idea might be the next big story. For the first time all morning, the horse stood still. The stranger moved close enough to look directly into its eyes. And the moment he did, his expression changed completely. Because what he saw inside that terrified animal was not rage. It was fear. For the next several seconds, nobody on the ranch dared to move. The black stallion stood motionless in the center of the muddy yard, its chest rising heavily as steam drifted from its body into the cold morning air. The ropes hanging from its neck had gone slack in the workers' trembling hands. A horse that moments earlier looked ready to kill now stared silently at the stranger standing only inches away. The crowd whispered nervously behind the fence. Sheriff Dawson lowered his rifle slightly but kept his finger close to the trigger. Walter Mercer looked more confused than relieved. He had seen wild horses calm down before, but never like this. Not this quickly. The stranger kept his eyes fixed on the stallion. Up close, he noticed details nobody else seemed to care about. Fresh cuts marked the animal's legs. Dirt and dried blood clung to its side. The horse's breathing was uneven, almost panicked, as if it had spent the entire night running from something no one else could see. The stranger slowly lifted a hand toward its face. The workers shouted immediately, "Don't touch him! That thing will rip your arm off!" But the stallion didn't attack. Its ears twitched nervously while the stranger gently rested his hand against the side of its neck. The powerful animal flinched for a moment before becoming still again. The stranger could feel the horse trembling beneath its dark coat. Not with anger, with fear. Walter stepped forward carefully. "You some kind of horse trainer?" The stranger glanced at him briefly. "No." "Then how'd you stop him?" The man looked back at the stallion. "Because this horse isn't trying to hurt anyone." Several people laughed at that. One ranch hand pointed toward the shattered stable doors. "You call this harmless?" The stranger ignored him. His eyes moved toward the damaged barn across the yard. Broken wooden boards hung from twisted hinges, and deep hoof marks scarred the ground nearby. But something about the destruction felt wrong to him. It looked less like an attack, and more like an escape attempt. "When did this start?" he asked quietly. Walter crossed his arms. "About 3 months ago. Horse was fine before that. Then one night he started going mad after sunset. Every night since gets worse. Only at night." Walter nodded slowly. The stranger crouched near the mud beside the stable entrance. He studied the ground carefully while the townspeople watched in silence. Among the dozens of boot prints and hoof tracks, he noticed something unusual. Fresh wagon marks. Heavy ones. His eyes narrowed. "You been hauling supplies through here?" he asked. Walter looked confused. "No." Before the stranger could answer, a stable worker suddenly spoke from the back of the crowd. "It ain't just the horse," the young man said nervously. Walter shot him a warning look. Tom. But the worker continued anyway. Animals been acting strange for weeks. Dogs barking at the hills every night. Horses refusing to go near the north barn. His voice dropped lower. And some livestock disappeared too. The crowd murmured uneasily. Walter's jaw tightened. That's enough. The stranger stood slowly. North barn. Walter hesitated for the first time all morning. It burned years ago, he muttered. Nobody uses it now. But the stranger noticed the way the ranch owner avoided eye contact. The stallion suddenly jerked its head upward. Its muscles tightened again. A low nervous sound rumbled deep in its throat as it stared toward the distant hills beyond the ranch. The stranger turned in the same direction. At first, he saw nothing. Then movement. Far beyond the fences, near the edge of the dry hills, a figure on horseback disappeared behind the trees. The stallion began backing away anxiously. Sheriff Dawson lifted the rifle again. Easy now. Don't, the stranger interrupted firmly. The horse wasn't acting violent anymore. It was warning them. The stranger slowly removed the loose rope hanging from the stallion's neck. Gasps spread through the crowd immediately. You're crazy, Walter whispered. Maybe he was. But as the stranger stared into the frightened eyes of the black stallion once more, one thing became clear in his mind. This animal had seen something terrible. And whatever haunted this ranch at night had not gone away. By late afternoon, the excitement around Mercer Ranch had spread through the entire town. People gathered outside the property in small groups, whispering theories about the black stallion and the mysterious stranger who stopped the sheriff from killing it. Some believed the horse had sensed danger. Others thought the stranger was nothing more than a drifter looking for trouble. But no matter what they believed, nobody could explain why the violent animal suddenly became calm the moment the stranger touched it. The ranch itself felt uneasy. Even the wind moving through the dry fields sounded strange. Walter Mercer ordered everyone back to work before sunset, but fear still hung heavily over the property. Workers repaired broken stall doors, while others avoided looking toward the north side of the ranch where the burned barn stood abandoned in the distance. The stranger spent the entire afternoon near the stallion. He spoke little, mostly observing the horse in silence. The animal remained nervous, constantly watching the hills beyond the ranch fence. Every sudden sound made its muscles tighten. It barely touched its food and refused to let anyone except the stranger near it. That alone disturbed Walter more than he wanted to admit. As evening approached, the sky darkened under heavy clouds. Ranch hands hurried to finish chores before nightfall, clearly eager to get indoors. The stranger noticed their behavior immediately. "You all afraid of the dark now?" he asked one of the workers. The man forced a weak laugh. "Around here, you should be too." Before the stranger could ask more, Walter interrupted sharply. "Enough talking. Finish your work." The ranch owner walked away, but the worker leaned closer for a moment. "Things move out there at night," he whispered nervously. "Especially near the old barn." The stranger watched him leave. Not long after sunset, the ranch became unnaturally quiet. Most of the workers locked themselves inside the main house while Sheriff Dawson remained nearby with one deputy in case the stallion became violent again. Oil lamps glowed softly across the ranch yard, barely pushing back the darkness surrounding the property. The stranger sat outside the stable alone. The black stallion stood inside its stall, restless and alert. Then suddenly, the horse froze. Its ears shot upward. A deep nervous sound escaped its throat as it backed away into the corner of the stall. The stranger stood immediately. He heard it too. Hoofbeats. Faint. Somewhere beyond the hills. The stallion began kicking the wooden walls violently again. The entire stable shook under the force of its hooves. Horses in nearby stalls panicked instantly, screaming and pulling against their ropes. Lights turned on inside the ranch house. Workers shouted in alarm. Sheriff Dawson grabbed his rifle and ran across the yard. What the hell's happening now? But the stranger was already moving. He opened the stall before anyone could stop him. "Are you insane?" Walter yelled from the porch. The stallion burst out of the stable like a black storm, racing across the ranch yard toward the northern fields. The stranger jumped onto his horse and followed immediately. Behind them, angry voices echoed through the darkness. But the stranger ignored them. The stallion wasn't running wild. It was leading him somewhere. Cold wind tore across the open land as both horses raced toward the abandoned north barn standing alone near the edge of the property. Burned wooden beams still leaned crookedly against its walls from the old fire years ago. In the moonlight, the place looked dead. The stallion suddenly stopped outside the barn entrance. Breathing hard, it pawed nervously at the dirt. The stranger slowly climbed down from his horse. At first, everything seemed silent. Then he noticed it. A faint light inside the barn. His hand moved instinctively toward the revolver at his side. Carefully, he stepped closer to the broken doorway. Inside, hidden beneath the ruined structure, he saw fresh footprints in the dirt, stacked wooden crates, lanterns, and recently used supplies. Someone had been there very recently. Then a floorboard creaked deeper inside the barn. The stranger turned sharply toward the sound. And from somewhere inside the darkness, a voice suddenly spoke. "You should have let them shoot that horse." The stranger's hand tightened around the revolver at his side as silence swallowed the burned barn. The weak lantern light inside barely illuminated the ruined structure. Broken beams hung overhead like skeleton bones, and cold wind slipped through cracks in the blackened walls. The black stallion remained outside the entrance, pacing nervously and snorting into the darkness. Then the voice spoke again. "You heard me," the man said calmly from somewhere deeper inside the barn. "Would have saved everybody a lot of trouble." The stranger slowly stepped forward, eyes scanning the shadows. A figure emerged beside a stack of wooden crates. Tall, armed, face hidden beneath a dark hat. The man held a rifle loosely in his hands, like someone completely comfortable using it. Behind him sat several crates marked with shipping symbols the stranger immediately recognized. Stolen supplies, ammunition, medicine, expensive cargo that had disappeared from towns across the territory over the past few months. Suddenly everything made sense. This ranch wasn't haunted. It was being used. "You've been hiding here," the stranger said quietly. The armed man smirked. "Smart enough to figure that out, huh?" The stranger glanced around carefully. More footprints covered the dirt floor. Bedrolls rested near the walls beside empty food cans and lantern fuel. At least 5 or 6 men had been staying there regularly. And the stallion had seen all of it. "The horse kept trying to warn them," the stranger murmured. The outlaw laughed softly. "That stupid animal caused more problems than any sheriff ever did." Outside, the stallion suddenly stomped the ground violently. The outlaw's expression darkened. "He sees us coming before anybody else does," the man admitted. "That's why we tried scaring him off at first. But the beast wouldn't stop." The stranger's eyes narrowed. "So you hurt him?" The outlaw shrugged coldly. "Should have killed him." A sharp sound interrupted the moment. Hoofbeats. Multiple riders approaching fast. The outlaw smiled slowly. "Looks like the rest of my boys are back." The stranger instantly stepped backward toward the doorway, but another rifle clicked somewhere behind him. He turned sharply. A second outlaw stood near the entrance, pointing a gun directly at his chest. "You picked the wrong ranch to visit, cowboy," the man sneered. Outside, more horses surrounded the barn. The black stallion reared violently, screaming into the night. The stranger's mind raced. At the ranch house nearly half a mile away, nobody knew what he had found. If these men decided to kill him, there would be no witnesses. No help. Nothing. The first outlaw stepped closer. "Here's what's gonna happen. You walk back to town before sunrise and forget what you saw." "And if I don't?" The man's smile vanished completely. "Then we bury you beside this barn." For several tense seconds, nobody moved. Then suddenly, the stallion exploded into furious screams outside. Gunshots rang through the darkness. The outlaws cursed and turned toward the entrance just as the black horse burst through the broken barn doors like a charging bull. Wood shattered everywhere. Lantern light swung wildly across the walls. The stallion slammed directly into one outlaw, throwing him hard against a crate. Supplies crashed across the floor while another man fired blindly into the darkness. The stranger reacted instantly. He drew his revolver and struck the second outlaw across the face before diving behind a support beam. More gunshots erupted inside the barn. Horses screamed outside while men shouted over each other in confusion. The lantern fell. Flames spread across the dry wooden floorboards immediately. "Fire!" someone yelled. Smoke rolled upward as panic exploded inside the ruined structure. The stranger grabbed the nearest outlaw and slammed him into the dirt before racing toward the entrance. The black stallion kicked another attacker backward, almost seeming to fight beside him. Outside, more riders appeared near the hills. Too many. The stranger realized this was far bigger than simple thieves hiding stolen supplies. These men were organized, armed, and desperate enough to kill anyone protecting their secret. And now they knew he had discovered everything. The outlaw leader stepped out of the smoke holding his rifle. "You should have minded your business," he growled. Before he could fire, another gunshot echoed across the ranch land. Everyone froze. Sheriff Dawson and several armed ranch hands appeared on horseback at the top of the hill, rifles pointed directly at the barn. Walter Mercer rode beside them with fury in his eyes. The outlaw leader cursed under his breath. And suddenly, the entire night exploded into chaos. Gunfire tore through the night as chaos erupted around the burning barn. Sheriff Dawson and the ranch hands charged down the hill with rifles raised while the outlaws scrambled for cover behind wagons and broken fences. Horses screamed in panic as bullets ripped through the darkness. Flames climbed higher inside the ruined barn, sending thick smoke twisting into the cold sky. The stranger ducked behind a water trough as a bullet smashed into the wood beside his head. "Move around the back," Sheriff Dawson shouted to his deputies. Walter Mercer grabbed a rifle from one of the ranch hands and fired toward the fleeing outlaws. Years of fear and silence burned in his eyes. He had spent months pretending not to notice strange riders crossing his land at night. The gang had threatened to burn the ranch completely if he spoke to anyone. Now there was no hiding anymore. The outlaw leader barked orders while smoke surrounded him. "Get the crates out. Don't leave anything behind." Two men rushed toward the barn entrance, but the black stallion suddenly charged through the flames again like a creature born from the fire itself. The horse slammed into one outlaw hard enough to send him rolling through the dirt while another dropped his rifle trying to escape the animal's hooves. Nobody watching could believe it. The same horse they planned to kill that morning was now protecting the entire ranch. The stranger sprinted across the yard and tackled one outlaw near the wagon. Both men crashed into the dirt violently. The outlaw reached for a knife, but before he could strike, the stallion reared above him with a deafening scream. The outlaw froze instantly. The stranger knocked him unconscious with one punch. Nearby, Sheriff Dawson's deputies cornered two more gang members attempting to flee toward the hills. Gunshots echoed one final time before silence slowly settled over the ranch land. The outlaw leader realized they were losing. With rage burning across his face, he grabbed a lantern from the wagon and hurled it toward the remaining side of the barn. Flames exploded across the dry wood instantly. "If we can't keep it," he shouted, "nobody will." Walter Mercer stared in horror as the fire spread. "There's still workers inside," someone screamed. Without hesitation, Walter ran directly toward the flames. The stranger cursed and followed him. Inside the smoke-filled barn, terrified horses kicked against their stalls while burning wood crashed from the ceiling. Walter covered his face with his coat and fought through the heat toward a trapped stable hand pinned beneath a fallen beam. Together, he and the stranger lifted the heavy wood just enough for the young worker to crawl free. The black stallion appeared beside the entrance again, screaming wildly as sparks flew around its dark body. "Come on!" the stranger yelled. They barely escaped seconds before part of the roof collapsed behind them in an explosion of fire and smoke. Outside, deputies finally dragged the outlaw leader to the ground in handcuffs while the remaining criminals surrendered one by one. Ranch hands quickly formed a line carrying buckets from the water pump to stop the flames from spreading farther across the property. For a long moment, everyone simply stood there breathing heavily beneath the orange glow of the burning barn. Alive! Sheriff Dawson walked slowly toward the stranger. "Looks like you were right about that horse." The stranger glanced toward the black stallion standing quietly near the fence. Despite the smoke and chaos, the animal no longer looked afraid. For the first time since arriving at the ranch, it stood calm beneath the night sky. Walter Mercer approached slowly, shame written across his exhausted face. "I almost had him killed," he whispered. Nobody answered, because they all knew it was true. By sunrise, the fire had finally burned out. The stolen supplies hidden inside the barn were recovered, and the surviving outlaws were taken back to town in chains. Word spread quickly about what happened at Mercer Ranch. By morning, townspeople gathered once again near the fence. But this time, nobody came to watch a horse die. They came to see the horse that saved them. The black stallion stood proudly beside the stranger while workers repaired broken fences around the ranch yard. Children stared at the animal with amazement instead of fear. Even Sheriff Dawson removed his hat respectfully as he passed by. Walter Mercer stepped toward the stranger carefully. "Guess I owe you both my life." The stranger looked toward the stallion. "You owe him more than me." Walter nodded slowly. After a moment, the stranger saddled his horse quietly and prepared to leave the ranch. No speeches. No celebration. Just silence. Before riding away, he walked once more to the black stallion. The animal lowered its head gently beside him. The stranger rested a hand against its neck and smiled faintly. "You were never dangerous," he said softly. "Just trying to tell the truth." Then he climbed onto his horse and rode toward the open hills beyond the ranch. The black stallion watched him disappear into the morning light while the people of Mercer Ranch finally understood the truth they almost learned too late. Sometimes the thing everyone fears the most is the very thing trying to save them.